I lived outside the HOA. I bought this land to be left alone. But one morning, a $7,200 HOA fee was taped to my gate. And that same night, my property line got edited at 2:13 a.m. Then they sent me an eviction notice, dug a 6-foot trench straight into my land, and told me I belonged to their HOA now. They thought I'd roll over, but they forgot one thing. I'm a forensic land survey expert, and I didn't just sue them. I built a case to put them in prison. When I walked away from the city for the last time, I didn't look back. 20 years of forensics work will drain the life out of anyone. Long nights in windowless offices, attorneys breathing down your neck, judges asking you to explain the difference between a real boundary line and one somebody photoshopped at 3 a.m. I'd had enough. Enough concrete, enough courtrooms. Enough people who thought land was just a number on a tax sheet. I wanted dirt, real dirt, the kind that gets under your nails and stains your jeans and makes you feel like you're standing on something honest. That's what led me to the old Coulter place, 180 acres of open, forgotten land, sitting just outside the neatly trimmed world of Ridgewood Meadows. The listing barely had a picture, just a faded aerial map and the words, "Reclamation Eligible Rural Acreage." Most folks skipped it, but I saw potential. I saw a place where a man could breathe. I drove out there on a late autumn afternoon, sun low behind the ridge, the air sharp with sage and old cedar. The barn leaned like it had had one too many. The fence line sagged, and the creek bed fought to remember it used to carry water. But to me, it looked like freedom wearing a few scars. Nothing I couldn't fix. The best part, the part that made me grin like a kid, was the paperwork. A clean deed, clear survey markers, and right there in black and white, not part of any homeowners association. I'd seen what HOAs do to people. I've testified in enough cases to write a book about it. The moment I signed those closing papers and walked out of the county building with my folder of documents, it felt like someone cut loose a chain I didn't know I'd been dragging. The first week out there was quiet, beautifully quiet. I parked my old Airstream next to the barn, patched the roof with aluminum sheets, hooked up my solar generator, and listened to the wind pass through the grass like an old friend. Every morning, I'd brew black coffee on a camp stove and remind myself, this right here is the point. I cleared the overgrown access road, rebuilt the small wooden bridge over the creek, and posted a few pictures in a local conservation group online. Folks wrote nice things like, "Glad someone's restoring the old place," and "Looks like it's in good hands." For once, I felt like the good guy in the story. A few days later, Sheriff Denny Hope stopped by. Now, Denny's the kind of man built like a refrigerator, broad, slow-moving, and made entirely of muscle and skepticism. He stepped out of his truck, looked around at the land, and nodded approvingly. "Heard you're the one fixing up the old tract," he said. "Good. It's been an eyesore." I told him about the restoration grant, my plans, and how the land wasn't part of Ridgewood Meadows. He gave me a strange little smile, half warning, half sympathy. "Good," he said. "Just don't let those HOA folks push you around. They like to think the county ends where their street signs do." I chuckled. He didn't. At the time, I didn't think much about his warning, not until 2 days later, when I met her, and my quiet little dream of freedom turned into the opening shot of a war I never asked for, but damn sure wasn't going to lose. I met her on a Wednesday morning, one of those crisp, windless Colorado mornings where sound carries too clean and too far. I was trimming brush along the eastern fence line, arms scratched, shirt damp with sweat, when I heard tires on gravel, not ranch tires, not county tires, something smoother, prouder. A luxury SUV rolled to a slow stop, like it owned the road just by touching it. The door opened with a soft, expensive click, and out stepped a woman who looked as if she'd been sculpted out of ice, pearls, and HOA bylaws. Perfect blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, a clipboard clutched tight like an emblem of power. She didn't smile, she appraised. "Excuse me," she called, but the way she said it felt more like she was summoning a waiter she intended to complain about. I nodded. "Morning. Something I can help you with?" She walked toward me, heels sinking a little into the dirt. Even that seemed to offend her. Then she announced herself with the kind of pride usually reserved for senators or royalty. "I'm Karen Westmore, president of the Ridgewood Meadows Homeowners Association." She waited for recognition. She didn't get any. You ever see disappointment flicker across someone's face when they realize their title means nothing to you? It's subtle, but satisfying. She pressed her lips together, then opened her clipboard. We've noticed increased activity here, heavy equipment, noise, and landscaping that is clearly out of compliance with community aesthetic standards. I stared at her for half a second. Ma'am, this land isn't part of your community. Her smile tightened into a hard line you could have used as a ruler. Oh, I'm sure that's what your realtor told you, she said. Her tone was dipped in condescension. But the borders have been adjusted. You'll be receiving information soon. No explanation, no paperwork, just a threat in a polite wrapper. She turned, walked back to her SUV, and drove off, leaving a faint cloud of dust and an even heavier cloud of arrogance behind her. I stood there, hands on my hips, thinking. I left the city to get away from people exactly like that. That night, sitting by my campfire, I flipped through the folder that held every deed, every map, every coordinate confirming, beyond doubt, that my land sat completely outside Ridgewood Meadows. But her voice stuck in my head. You'll be receiving information soon. I'd testified in enough property cases to know. The quieter the threat, the sharper the knife behind it. The fire crackled. Coyotes called. I tried to shake it off. But I barely made it 48 hours. Because 2 mornings later, I stepped out of my Airstream at sunrise and instantly saw something wrong. A paper flapping wildly on my gate, pinned with blue painter's tape. Rain from the night before had soaked the edges, ink bleeding into the fiber. I tore it off and read the heading. Notice of violations, unauthorized activity, non-compliant land use. I rolled my eyes until I saw the number at the bottom. Initial assessment due, 7 toned. Pay within 10 days to avoid escalation. I just stood there, wind blowing, coffee cooling in my hand. $7,200 for what? Cutting brush, fixing a barn, breathing? My first sound was a laugh, short, sharp, almost disbelieving. The kind of laugh a man lets out when he realizes someone thinks he's stupid. But the longer I stared at the number, the less funny it got. Money is intention. Money is pressure. Money is the opening punch. That wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a declaration. We own you now. I crumpled the soggy paper in my fist and tossed it into a puddle. The ripples spread out slowly, like the beginning of something I wasn't going to be able to ignore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the first shot. And something deep inside me said Karen wasn't just pushing, she was planning. And whatever she thought she was building, she had just picked the wrong man to build it against. I didn't sleep well after finding that 7200 notice. There's a certain kind of silence that settles over land when something isn't right. Too still, too clean, too intentional. Even the wind feels like it's circling, waiting. That night, every creak of the Airstream sounded like footsteps. Every flicker on the trailer's aluminum skin felt like headlights passing. I'd lived alone plenty of times before, but this was different. This wasn't isolation. This was surveillance. By sunrise, I'd had enough guessing. I poured a mug of bitter coffee, sat down at my makeshift desk, and logged into the county's public mapping portal, the same one I'd used 100 times during my career as a forensic survey expert. I typed in my parcel number. For a moment, everything looked normal. The same borders, the same coordinates, the same 180 acres of wild grass and battered fence posts. But then I clicked on Boundary Revision History. The page hesitated, lagged, and finally loaded. My stomach tightened. There, in the corner of the screen, was a tiny notation I almost missed. Boundary Adjustment Request. Approved. Timestamp 2:13 a.m. I leaned in closer. No way a county office approved anything at that hour. Not legally. I clicked to the audit log. The entry expanded like a wound being opened. User ID Clerk L. Harrison. Action, Boundary Realignment Method. Manual edit, supporting documents. None uploaded. Time, 02:13:47 a.m. I stared at the screen, feeling my pulse climb into my throat. 2:13 a.m. Manual edit. No uploaded documentation. That wasn't a clerical mistake. That was a cover operation. Someone had crept into the county's GIS system in the middle of the night and pushed my land into HOA territory by dragging a digital line like a kid cheating on a coloring book. And worse, they thought nobody would ever check. Old habits kicked in. The forensic expert in me took over. I hit print screen so hard the keyboard clicked. Then I took a second screenshot, and a third. 3 redundant captures, different zoom levels, different layers toggled, all time-stamped automatically by my operating system. Screenshots are fragile things, easy to alter, easy to contest, but patterns? Patterns tell the truth. I saved everything into a folder I labeled Threat Log No. 1, Digital Fraud. Experience told me one thing clearly. If an HOA was bold enough to forge a boundary in the county system, they would also be bold enough to try to erase their tracks the moment daylight hit. So I printed all 3 screenshots, full color, high DPI. Then I slid them into a waterproof folder and sealed it shut. Old school backups never crash. With the evidence secured, I called the county clerk's office the moment they opened. A young voice answered, cheerful, innocent. County clerk's office, this is Ellie speaking. Hi, Ellie. I'm calling about a boundary revision on parcel 228C, logged at 2:13 a.m. I need clarification. Silence, not confusion. Not searching, just silence. Then a soft, uneasy breath. 2:13 a.m., she repeated slowly. Sir, our office closes at 5 p.m. Nothing gets approved after hours unless there's an emergency filing. And even that requires 2 signatures. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice even, somebody logged into your system at 2:13 a.m. and realigned my southern boundary line? Another silence, longer this time. I'm not seeing anything about that here, she said, but the system shows a login around that time from an account belonging to, she hesitated, to our clerk, Mr. Harrison. I knew that hesitation. He wasn't in trouble yet, but she was realizing he was going to be. One more thing, I said. There were no supporting documents uploaded. Is that normal? She exhaled sharply, almost a nervous laugh. No, that's not normal at all. That's actually a violation of county procedure. Her voice lowered, cautious. Sir, could you email me whatever you're seeing, the timestamp especially? No problem, I said. Already documented. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. This wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't an accident, wasn't a clerical screw-up. This was the moment the war officially turned digital. The HOA wasn't just bending rules. They were reaching into government systems, pulling strings like puppeteers, trying to rewrite reality with a mouse click. And they did it at 2:13 in the damn morning. I looked out across my land, wind moving through the sage, fog lifting off the pond, the barn standing crooked but proud. They thought I bought this place because I wanted peace, but I bought it because I understand land. And land doesn't lie, people do. And I had just caught them lying in the most traceable way possible. By the time afternoon rolled around, my land felt different, like the air itself had shifted. When someone tampers with your property line at 2:13 in the morning, it's never their last move. People that bold don't slow down, they escalate. And I had a strong suspicion escalation was coming sooner than later. That evening, I walked the perimeter before sundown. Not because I was scared, but because checking fence lines is as natural to me as brushing my teeth. I made sure the solar generator was humming, the floodlights were working, and every trail cam I'd mounted high in the trees had a fresh SD card. Old habits from my forensics days, redundancy is survival. By midnight, the wind picked up, whispering across the grass in long, soft waves. I brewed another pot of coffee, sat at my desk, and started labeling the screenshot prints from that morning. Around 12:47 a.m., a faint mechanical sound drifted through the night air. At first, I thought it was just wind, but then it happened again. A metallic click, followed by a short whine, high-pitched, electrical. I froze. That wasn't wind. That was a cheap external battery pack powering down. My generator. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand. My boots sank slightly into the cool dirt. The moon was bright enough to see the edge of the barn, but everything beyond that sank into long shadows. The generator shouldn't have gone silent, not unless someone tampered with it. And I had a sick feeling someone had. I didn't chase, didn't yell, didn't try to catch anyone in the act. Instead, I did what someone like me is trained to do. I checked the cameras. Back inside the Airstream, I loaded the SD cards and pulled up the south-facing trail cam footage first. The video buffered, the infrared view flickering to life, grainy but sharp. And there they were, two figures, moving quietly. Hoodies pulled up, flashlights covered with red film to reduce glare. The first one walked straight to my generator. He crouched, snipped the power cable in one quick motion. The second walked to my gate, my main gate, and unbolted the hinge brackets like he'd done it before. My jaw tightened. Then the first guy turned his head, and the camera caught his face. Just long enough, just clear enough. Young, broad-shouldered, nervous posture, kept glancing back at the road like he expected headlights any second. I recognized him immediately. Tyler Westmore, Karen's son, the HOA's monitoring director. I'd seen him in their welcome packet, in his pressed polo shirt and forced smile, probably posed in front of a mailbox he fined someone for painting the wrong shade of beige. But the version on my camera wasn't smiling. He was trembling, panicked, dangerous. The footage ended after 10 minutes. They left quickly, slinking away like raccoons caught in a pantry, confident their little act of sabotage had gone unseen. They didn't know I had cameras on every side of the property. High, hidden, infrared, motion-triggered, and backed up on cloud storage. This wasn't my first dance with people trying to hide in the shadows. I sat there for a long moment, staring at Tyler's paused frame on the screen. Not angry, just cold. Very cold. This wasn't administrative pressure. Wasn't a fine. Wasn't community standards. This was criminal trespass, tampering with utility equipment, property destruction, premeditation, and maybe worst of all, they were escalating within days. I copied the footage to a flash drive, labeled it with permanent marker, Threat Log Number 2, Tyler Sabotage. Then I drove into town. Sheriff Denny Hope opened his office door in pajama pants and a flannel shirt, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He didn't even ask why I was there at 1:30 in the morning. I think he already knew. I set the flash drive on his counter. He plugged it in. The footage lit up his screen. Halfway through, he muttered one word under his breath. Damn. When it ended, he leaned back, exhaled slow, and rubbed his face. Cutting your generator line? Unbolting your gate? He shook his head. That's felony territory. You gonna arrest him? I asked. He hesitated, just long enough for the truth to show in his eyes. Jake, HOA folks lawyer up fast. This is going to require an investigation. I'll push it up the chain first thing in the morning. I stepped closer. If I cut their power, if I tore down their gate, I said quietly, would I be sitting in this office right now, or would I be in the back of a cruiser? He didn't answer, because we both knew. And that silence, that told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't dealing with complaints, I wasn't dealing with rules, I was dealing with people who thought that they were untouchable, and people like that only stop when someone stronger pushes back, hard. By the next morning, I half expected the HOA to back off, at least long enough to lick their wounds. That's what reasonable people do when they get caught on camera committing 2 felonies before sunrise. But Karen and her little kingdom weren't reasonable. They were bold, stupid, and convinced the world worked the way they said it did. When I opened my gate just after dawn, fresh coffee in hand, the first thing I saw was a stack of envelopes wedged into the wire mesh, like someone fired them out of a t-shirt cannon. 5 envelopes, all bright white, all stamped with Ridgewood Meadows Community Affairs Division. Not certified mail, not county seals, just paper armor trying to look official. I tore the first one open. Violation, unauthorized structure repair. Fine, $350. The barn had been leaning for 20 years before I even arrived. But apparently, brushing cobwebs and hammering a loose plank counted as a structural infraction now. Envelope 2. Violation, noise complaint, heavy machinery. Fine, $480 is my pickup truck backfiring. That was the machinery. Envelope 3. Violation, environmental disruption, vegetation disturbance. Fine, $1,025 in I'd cut weeds taller than my truck. Envelope 4. Violation, refusal to submit landscaping plan for approval. Fine, $250. I laughed so hard my coffee nearly spilled. Landscaping plan on 180 acres of wild sage and prairie grass. Envelope 5, the thickest one. I opened slow. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed in bold uppercase letters. Notice of eviction for failure to maintain community compliance. My jaw clenched. Eviction, on land I owned outright, not rented, not leased, not borrowed. Under that headline was a paragraph so absurd it belonged in a comedy sketch. Due to repeated non-compliance and unpaid assessments totaling 7 ton, Ridgewood Meadows HOA extremes its authority to revoke residency privileges. You are required to vacate the premises within 30 days. And at the bottom, the kicker. Failure to vacate may result in removal by Ridgewood Meadows enforcement personnel. I stared at the page until the words blurred. Enforcement personnel. They weren't even pretending anymore. This wasn't about weeds, or noise, or aesthetic harmony. This was a takeover, a land grab dressed in paperwork and arrogance. I folded the letter slowly, deliberately. No rush. When you've seen real corruption in court, maps altered, deeds forged, families pushed off land they owned since the Civil War, you develop a sense for when something is bigger than a bad neighbor. And this was bigger. I knew their game now. The fines, the fake boundaries, the nighttime sabotage, it all pointed to one thing. They wanted my land, and they wanted it fast. But they had a problem. A very big, very inconvenient problem. I wasn't going anywhere. I walked to my barn, grabbed a galvanized steel clipboard, and clipped every single notice onto it, flat, neat, in a row. Then I hammered the clipboard onto a fence post facing the county road, so anyone driving by could see exactly what Ridgewood Meadows thought that they had the right to do. Within an hour, 2 of the HOA's community officers pulled up in their hybrid sedan, stepped out, saw the display, and immediately started bickering with each other. Good, let them sweat. Because I wasn't hiding their threats, I was documenting them. And while they were busy making fake rules, fake fees, and fake authority, I was building something real, a record, a trail, a case. They could throw all the paper at me they wanted, but I dealt in facts, timestamps, audit logs, and evidence, and now they'd given me plenty. I walked back to the Airstream, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and smiled to myself. If they thought a stack of fake fines and a pretend eviction notice were going to make me leave, they hadn't learned a damn thing about me yet. After the eviction notice, I didn't get mad. I got focused. The HOA wanted to play games with lines on a map? Fine. I spent 20 years making sure those lines held up in federal courtrooms. It was time to remind them what real surveying looked like. I waited until the sun was high, packed my field bag, and headed out to the southern edge of my land, the same area the digital boundary adjustment tried to absorb into Ridgewood Meadows. From a distance, it just looked like grass and sage, but to me, it was a crime scene. And crime scenes deserve precision. I opened my equipment case, the foam-lined interior holding tools I trusted with my reputation. Trimble R12i GNSS receiver, survey-grade carbon fiber pole, dual-band RTK base unit with long-range radio, laser rangefinder, old-school steel chain, because redundancy never fails. If Karen saw this gear, she'd probably think I was setting up a weather station. I set the RTK base station first, anchoring it on hard ground and letting it sync with satellites. The receiver chirped, locked onto 12, then 15 satellites. Beautiful signal strength. Then I placed the pole on the first corner marker, a weathered steel rod hammered into the earth decades ago. Most folks wouldn't even notice it, but it was exactly where the county's certified plat map said it would be. The GNSS receiver beeped, lat long, matched within 0.02 feet. Perfect. I logged the coordinate, saved it twice, then took a photo with my phone showing the stake, the pole, the ground texture, and the timestamp. Evidence, evidence, evidence. I walked the line slowly, methodically. Each survey marker told the same story. My deed was right, my plat map was right, my coordinates were right, and the HOA was wrong. I took readings at every corner, then along the midpoints, then along the southern boundary, where the fraudulent adjustment tried to slide my land into their jurisdiction like a magician palming a card. When I reached the exact spot where the county's digital edit had moved the line northward, I planted the pole and stood still. The GNSS receiver pinged. I checked the display. My original boundary was exactly where it had always been. The HOA adjusted one was 17 feet south. 17 feet, not a rounding error, not a software glitch. A grab, a deliberate reach. I knelt, brushing aside dry grass until I found the old survey pin, rusted but solid. I photographed it from every angle, even laid a small measuring tape beside it. Then I took a slow breath and scanned the horizon. Ridgewood meadows sat beyond the ridge, beige roofs glinting in the afternoon sun, peaceful, neat, orderly, on the surface. But beneath that, rot, desperation, and now evidence of fraud. On the way back, I used the laser rangefinder to check distances between markers. Everything matched the county's certified measurements, not the edited ones. When I reached the airstream again, I offloaded all data into a folder labeled Threat Log Number 3, Field Survey Confirmation, coordinates, photos, satellite logs, base corrections, everything. Then I printed the summary in large, bold type. Boundary unchanged. HOA claim invalid. Digital alteration confirmed. I pinned the printout above my desk and stared at it. My pulse finally steadied. Some people fight with fists, some with fines. But my weapon had always been the truth carved into land, measured down to fractions of an inch. And now I had indisputable proof the HOA wasn't just harassing me, they were manufacturing a parallel reality. As I leaned back in my chair, the wind outside shifted, pushing a dry cedar smell through the trailer door. That's when a thought hit me. If they were willing to alter county records at 2:13 a.m., if they had already trespassed, if Tyler had cut my generator and unbolted my gate, then sooner or later they'd go for something bigger, something bold, something stupid. And if I wanted to beat them, I couldn't just defend. I needed a plan, a trap, a smart one. Because the next time they came onto my land, I wanted them caught so cleanly, so completely, that not even the best HOA lawyer in the state could pry them loose. And that thought, that's where everything changed. You learn a few things after 2 decades testifying in land disputes. 1, people who want your land rarely stop at paperwork. 2, the best way to catch someone dirty is to give them something too tempting to resist. And 3, if you want a rat to walk into a trap, you don't chase it. You leave the door open and walk away. So, that's exactly what I did. I sat at my desk that evening, the survey data freshly printed, the 7200 fine still pinned to my fence, and thought about every case I'd ever worked. About developers forging easements, contractors burying utilities across boundaries, HOAs using environmental claims as weapons, and then I thought about something else, something better, something elegant. An old property note I'd seen months earlier, back when this land first hit auction. A defunct groundwater monitoring well on the southern edge, long capped, long forgotten, but still officially listed in several old hydrology maps filed with the state. That spot had weight. It had history. And more importantly, it had legal teeth. If someone disturbed it, intentionally or not, it triggered environmental code violations that reached far beyond county ordinances. Fall under the wrong subsection, you're talking massive fines, federal oversight, even criminal charges. Exactly the kind of pit the HOA would walk straight into if they thought they were correcting my land use. I leaned back, hands behind my head, and grinned slow. I didn't just need a trap. I needed bait. The next morning, I hiked to the south boundary and found the old well cap, rusted, half swallowed by sagebrush, but unmistakably real. I cleared the brush and cleaned the site until it looked almost official. Then I built the stage. Step 1. I drove metal T-posts into the ground and stretched bright yellow safety tape in a neat square. Step 2. I bolted a laminated sign to a steel stake. Protected Aquifer Monitoring Zone, unauthorized access, prohibited under Colorado Water Code, Title 37. Below it, I added a small QR code that led to an innocuous public document about rural water protection zones. It didn't matter that the well was inactive. What mattered was perception and jurisdiction. Anyone messing with that site wasn't just trespassing. They'd be interfering with an environmental monitoring area, a big, shiny, stupid felony. Step 3. I made sure my trail cameras were dialed in, high in the trees, angled perfectly, backed by infrared and cloud sync. Then I installed 2 additional cams, hidden inside hollowed-out fence posts. Step 4. I crafted the nudge. HOAs don't act unless they feel threatened, so I gave them the threat they needed. An anonymous letter, typed on plain paper, Parcel 2228C is attempting to obstruct Ridgewood Meadows infrastructure development, refuses shared access to environmental resources, potential liability to the association, recommend immediate inspection. Signed, a concerned resident. I drove 30 miles to the next county and mailed it from a blue box behind a grocery store. No fingerprints, no trail. Then came step 5, the most important part. I vanished. For 3 full days I made myself scarce, turned off half the exterior lights, parked my truck behind the barn, even tossed a duffel bag in the Airstream window so it looked like I'd left for a weekend camping trip. If Ridgewood Meadows wanted my land this badly, I was about to give them the perfect chance to take it. On the afternoon of day 4, I returned from a supply run, fencing wire, trail cam batteries, and coffee, feeling that sixth sense I've developed for years. The air was heavy, disturbed, wrong, that subtle vibration in the ground left by machinery, a shift in the soil. I slowed my truck, my chest tightened, because when I reached the southern edge of my land, my headlights swept across something that made the steering wheel go cold under my hands. A trench, not a small one, 6 feet wide, 7 feet deep, running straight through the protected aquifer monitoring zone, fresh dirt piled on each side like an open wound. Orange flags, spray-painted lines, PVC stakes hammered into the earth. A laminated sign fluttered in the wind. Community Drainage Integration, Phase 1. Ridgewood Meadows HOA logo at the top. I pulled over, stepped out slowly, walked to the edge of the trench. They didn't just trespass. They didn't just dig. They violated an environmental protection zone I had clearly marked, which meant one thing. This stopped being a civil dispute. This was now criminal, and not even Karen could lawyer her way out of this one. My trap had worked, perfectly, and the war had officially crossed the line. I stood at the edge of that trench for a long moment, letting the cold evening air settle around me. Dry dirt crumbled beneath my boots, falling 6 feet down into the gash the HOA had carved into my land. The smell of raw earth mixed with the metallic tang of disturbed clay. It wasn't just vandalism. It wasn't just trespass. It was a deliberate excavation straight through a legally visible, protected aquifer monitoring zone, a zone I had labeled, staked, posted, and documented. They walked right into the trap and dug themselves into a felony. I crouched and touched the ground, still warm, still soft, meaning the crew had left recently, and they'd moved fast, too fast for amateurs. Someone had coordinated this. Someone who believed they were entitled to reshape land that didn't belong to them. Someone who thought that the HOA's imaginary jurisdiction could bulldoze Colorado water law. That someone, of course, was Karen Westmore. I pulled out my phone and began documenting everything. Photos, close-ups, geotags, distance measurements, angle shots, videos sweeping the entire trench from end to end. The flags told a disgusting story. They'd marked this out carefully. That meant planning, not a spontaneous mistake, not accidental. This was organized. And the irony? Every step they took to make it look official just made their crimes easier to prove. The laminated sign they had left behind read, Community Drainage Integration, Phase 1, Ridgewood Meadows Environmental Division, scan for project summary. I scanned the QR code. It linked to a PDF on their website, but the PDF was worse. It featured a map with my entire southern boundary labeled as Unclaimed Buffer Acreage, eligible for HOA infrastructure. My stomach tightened. Then I noticed something else, a faint distortion where my parcel line should have been, a poorly blended patch, a digital artifact, a cut and paste job. Someone had forged a public map, badly. I saved the PDF immediately, then screenshotted every page, just in case they tried to pull it down. When I zoomed in on the metadata, my heart gave a dark little laugh. Edited by K. Westmore, Software, Adobe Illustrator CC Last. Modified 1:22 a.m. Another late-night operation, another digital paper trail they never expected me to read. I opened their project summary. It was thin, vague, no signatures, no county approval, a fantasy printed on glossy letterhead, and now it was evidence. I walked back to my truck, grabbed a steel tape, and started measuring how far the trench cut into my side of the line. Each measurement added weight to the case I was building, 20 feet, 24, 28. At the far western point, the trench crossed so deeply into my land it came within 5 feet of a cluster of young trees I'd been nurturing for a reforestation grant. If they'd damaged even one of those saplings, the state could have revoked my funding. That turned my stomach from cold to hot. They hadn't just trespassed, they had endangered a federally funded project. That was the final nail. I made one last video sweeping across the entire scene, documenting unauthorized excavation inside a posted environmental monitoring zone, I narrated. My voice was steady but cold. Recorded at 6:42 p.m. Dirt still warm. No equipment left on site. HOA signage present. I ended the recording. Then I called Marissa. She answered on the second ring, breathless, like she'd been pacing. What happened? They dug, I said simply. A pause. Where? Through the monitoring zone. Another pause. Jake, that's environmental interference. That's not civil. That's not HOA. That's criminal. I know. Send me everything. Photos, maps, metadata, QR code link, the works. Already uploading to the drive. Her tone sharpened. What's your estimate on damage? Minimum? 20-foot incursion? Maximum? 30? And they nearly hit my reforestation grant trees. She swore under her breath. Okay, here's what happens next. I file an emergency complaint with the State Geodetic Survey. I pull the metadata from that PDF. I draft a criminal misrepresentation complaint to the county. You stay put. Why? Because they'll come back. People like this always come back when they think they've gotten away with something. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, I got an email from the state surveyor's office. A same-week site review scheduled, which only happens when they smell something rotten. 2 days later, a dusty Subaru with state plates rolled down my gravel road. Out stepped a woman in a canvas vest, silver hair tied back, carrying a GNSS Rover over one shoulder like a rifle. She introduced herself as Ingrid, State Geodetic Surveyor. Where's the problem? I pointed. Her eyes narrowed. Then she spent 4 hours taking readings, resetting control points, and checking every inch of disturbed soil. When she finished, she walked up to me, dusted off her hands, and said, "Your boundary is correct. The HOA's trench is 17 feet inside your property. And this PDF," she tapped her tablet, "Jingig is absolutely a forged land record. You're sure?" "Son," she said, "I've been doing this 37 years. I'm sure." She gave me a written preliminary finding. Marissa nearly screamed with joy when I sent it to her. That same afternoon, she filed a formal complaint for criminal misrepresentation of land boundaries, attached with the forged PDF, the QR code link, Ingrid's field notes, my survey logs, and the entire trail cam package. By nightfall, my land was no longer just a dispute. It was the center of a pending criminal investigation. Karen and her board didn't know it yet, but they had crossed a line you don't come back from. And the trap? It had worked better than I could have dreamed. 3 days after the state surveyor filed her preliminary report, my phone buzzed at 6:11 a.m. Too early for telemarketers. Too early for anyone except trouble or salvation. The caller I'd read, L. Harper. I didn't recognize the name. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. A woman's voice, soft, rushed, nervous, spilled through the speaker. "Please don't hang up. My name is Lorraine Harper. I worked for the HOA. I need to talk to you. In private." Her breath hitched like she'd been crying. I shut my truck door and leaned against it. "Then talk." "No, not on the phone," she whispered. "They monitor the HOA lines. They monitor our emails. And Karen," her voice cracked, "Karen will destroy anyone who crosses her." That part I believed instantly. "All right," I said. "Where? Do you know the diner on County Road 7, the one with the green awning?" "Yeah, 10 minutes. She hung up before I could ask a single question. The diner was half awake when I got there. Coffee brewing, old neon humming, a few ranchers murmuring over pancakes. I spotted her immediately. Mid-40s, tired eyes, shoulders pulled tight like she'd been bracing for a punch for months. A manila folder clutched so hard her knuckles were white. She looked up at me and flinched, like she expected someone else to be standing there. "You came," she said, voice barely above a breath. "I did." She gestured for me to sit. Her hands trembled as she pushed the folder across the table. "I'm not doing this to help you," she said. I'm doing it to save myself. The honesty surprised me. Karen made me sign things, she continued. Financial forms, annexation proposals, invoices that didn't exist. I tried to refuse, but she threatened to pin everything on me, said if anything ever came out, she'd tell investigators I forged the signatures. I stayed quiet and let her talk. She's been siphoning HOA money into a slush fund, tens of thousands, and she wants your land. Lorraine swallowed hard. Badly. Why? I asked. That's when Lorraine opened the manila folder. Inside was a black leather-bound ledger, cheap-looking but stuffed with receipts, handwritten notes, and photocopied checks. Pages dog-eared, corners torn, electric with the smell of fraud and desperation. She flipped it open, jabbing her finger at a highlighted section. This is why, she said. It read, Golf course expansion, parcel acquisition developer X, kickback upon completion, $500,000. I raised my eyebrows. Lorraine nodded, shame burning in her face. Karen told the board that your land was dead space, unused, inefficient. She needed it to extend the Ridgewood Club golf fairway. Developer X promised her $500,000 if she delivered your southern acreage clean. And the forged map? She paid someone to do it. I think her nephew, he works with Adobe. He bragged about it at the Christmas party. Karen told him to adjust the county boundary so she could claim the land was already part of the HOA. My jaw tightened. $500,000. That was why Karen had dug a trench through a protected monitoring zone. Why she forged county records. Why she sent false fines. Why she risked criminal charges. Greed. Plain and simple. Lorraine turned another page, and my stomach sank further. A list of expenses. 11th on. Compliance Division Operations. 3 tund. Environmental Prep. 18 none. Contractor Retainer. 650. County Facilitation. I tapped that last one. County Facilitation? Lorraine looked away. That's the bribe, she whispered. The clerk who edited your parcel record at 2:13 a.m. was paid through a third-party invoice. Karen told us it was for administrative assistance, but everyone knew. Her voice cracked again. I kept copies because I thought someday I might need them. Karen scares me, but prison scares me more. Why come to me now? I asked. She shut the ledger gently, almost like she was burying a memory. Because the investigators are already circling, she said. The trench, the forged PDF, the state surveyor's report. She lowered her voice. And Karen is panicking. When she panics, she looks for someone to blame. You? Me. Always me. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with years of bottled-up fear. Take the ledger, she said firmly. Make copies. Give it to your attorney. If they ask, tell them I'm ready to testify, as long as the DA grants immunity. I nodded slowly. Lorraine, I said, this will blow the HOA apart. I know. Then she managed a thin, trembling smile. I've been waiting for someone like you to come along and, she inhaled, finally end this. She stood, smoothing her shirt with shaking hands. One more thing, she said before leaving. Karen thinks she's untouchable because she controls the board, but she forgot something. What's that? Lorraine's smile hardened. Paper trails don't lie. She left the diner without looking back. I opened the ledger again, flipping through the pages of fraud, bribes, altered invoices, unauthorized transfers, every line a nail in the coffin of Ridgewood Meadows HOA. This wasn't just evidence. This was ammunition. And when I slid the ledger into my jacket, I knew exactly where the war was heading next, straight to the DA's office. I didn't go home after meeting Lorraine, not yet. First, I drove straight to Marissa's office, a small, neat building tucked between a feed store and an insurance agency. When she saw the leather-bound ledger in my hands, her jaw dropped so visibly I swear it hit carpet. Oh my God, she whispered. Jake, this is a gold mine. It's a grenade, I corrected. We're just the ones holding the pin. Her fingers flipped through page after page, bribes, fake invoices, kickback agreements, and Karen's signature appearing with suspiciously impossible frequency. By the 5th page, Marissa leaned back in her chair, exhaled sharply, and muttered, She's going to prison. Not fined, not sued, prison. Good, I said. Then let's start turning the screws. We made copies. We encrypted them. We stored them in 3 different places. By the time I left the office, the sun was sinking behind the ridge, painting the road home in a long red streak. But I didn't drive toward home. I drove toward Ridgewood Meadows HOA because I knew Karen. Bullies don't fold unless someone forces the issue, and I wanted to see her face when she realized she'd lost control of the narrative. The HOA clubhouse sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, lined with freshly repainted curbs. 3 SUVs were parked outside. Through the glass windows, I could see the board seated at a long table, Karen at the head, her pearl necklace gleaming like a badge of office. They were arguing. I could hear them from the parking lot. "Karen, the sheriff called twice." "Twice," one board member snapped. "We told you not to touch his land," another barked. Karen slammed her palm on the table hard enough to rattle the coffee mugs. "We need that acreage for phase 2. The developer is expecting—" She caught herself. Too late. The board members exchanged looks. I walked in. The room fell silent like someone had cut the power. Karen's face froze, her smile warping halfway between polite and predatory. "Well, well, look what the wind blew in." I nodded toward the board. "You folks might want to sit down for this." One of them, the treasurer, crossed her arms. "We're already sitting." "Good," I said, pulling a folder from my jacket, "because what I'm about to show you concerns all of you." Karen's voice sharpened like glass. "You have no authority to speak here. You are not a member." I held up a hand. "I'm not here to debate your imaginary jurisdiction. I'm here to show your board something you conveniently forgot to mention." I opened the folder. Inside was one of the photocopied pages from Lorraine's ledger, the one showing Developer X, kickback, 500,000 parcel acquisition, southern boundary, Westmore. Karen's entire body went rigid. One board member blinked, another leaned closer. The treasurer's lips parted in disbelief. "This isn't real," Karen snapped too quickly. "Fabricated. Lies." I tilted my head. "That's strange, because Lorraine Harper says otherwise." You could practically hear the air leave Karen's lungs. A board member frowned. "Lorraine? Lorraine hasn't shown up in weeks." Karen's jaw clenched. "She's disgruntled. She forged paperwork before. She's unstable." "I've got her notarized statement," I lied, confident enough in the truth to make it believable. "She's willing to testify." Karen's composure cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about." But the treasurer stood up. "Karen, did you take money from a developer?" Karen whipped around. "Of course not. This is a smear campaign. Don't you see? He's manipulating you." The treasurer jabbed a finger at the page. "Then why is your signature on every one of these entries?" The room erupted. Accusations, shouting, denials. One board member grabbed the photocopy from me and scanned it with trembling hands. "This says county facilitation. Is that the clerk? The one who edited the map?" she asked Karen. Karen looked around wildly, cornered. "That wasn't me. That was—" "Then who?" the treasurer demanded. Karen's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. I stepped forward. "You forged land records. You trespassed. You dug into a protected environmental site. And now, your own ledger shows a $500,000 motive." Karen's eyes burned into me, pupils pinning like a predator pressed into a trap. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think you're clever, but you don't understand how this works. HOAs don't lose. Developers don't lose. People like you, living out there in the dirt, you lose." I smiled. "I've been losing sleep, not battles." Then I set the final nail. "The DA has everything, and the state surveyor's report is already filed. This isn't a civil dispute anymore, Karen. It's criminal, and they're coming." The silence that followed was thick enough to stand on. One board member slowly pushed back his chair. "I'm done," he said quietly. "I'm not going down for you." Then another stood, and another, until only Karen remained seated, alone at the head of a collapsing empire. She glared at her board, not with fear, but with venom. "Cowards," she spat. "All of you." But no one stayed to hear more. Chairs scraped, footsteps echoed. The board filed out one by one, some shaking, some pale, all silent. Finally, it was just me and Karen. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and smiled, cold and thin. "You really think you've beaten me?" I leaned forward just enough for her to see the certainty in my eyes. "I don't think it," I said softly. "I know it." Then I slid a final sheet across the table, the forged map with her metadata burned into the corner. "Your maps," I said, turning toward the door, "are bleeding." And I left her sitting there in the fluorescent silence, her kingdom crumbling beneath her feet. The morning the raid happened started just like any other, quiet, cold, and deceptively normal. I was on my porch with a cup of black coffee, steam rising into the crisp Colorado air, when 3 SUVs rolled up my gravel road. Blacked out windows, steel bumpers, government plates, not HOA, not sheriff patrol cars. These were DA task force vehicles. My pulse ticked up, but not from fear, from satisfaction. The lead SUV stopped at the base of my porch. District Attorney Royce stepped out, hat, jacket, and that look prosecutors get when the paperwork finally catches up to the guilty. "Morning, Mr. Halstead," he called. "You must be here about the trench." He gave a half smile. "About a lot more than that." Marissa stepped out of the second vehicle, eyes bright with adrenaline. She held a thick binder, my evidence, Lorraine's ledger copies, metadata printouts, the forged maps, everything. "Today's the day," she whispered. I nodded once. I'd waited weeks for this. Royce clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Let's go pay Ridgewood Meadows a visit." The convoy rolled into the HOA subdivision like a slow-moving storm. Residents came out onto porches, confused, whispering, clutching morning coffee cups like shields. Then they saw the jackets. District Attorney, Special Investigations, County Sheriff, Civil Fraud Unit. And panic spread through Ridgewood Meadows like a fuse lighting a firework. We parked in front of the HOA office, Karen's pride and joy, built on dues she'd weaponized. The curtains twitched. A silhouette darted away from the window. Sheriff Daniels approached the glass door, knuckles ready, and pounded 3 times. "Karen Westmore, open the door!" No answer. He tried the handle, locked. "Of course," Marissa muttered. Daniels nodded to his deputy. "Pop it." One clean swing of a breaching bar, the latch shattered. The door flew inward. Papers fluttered. A woman shrieked from inside. They moved fast. Within seconds, investigators were pouring through the office, photographing, bagging documents, disconnecting computers, pulling hard drives, checking drawers. Then I heard the first major break. "Sir, we found something." I followed the voice to the back room. There, in the glow of a desk lamp, an investigator held up a USB stick labeled in sloppy handwriting, "Map template, final draft." Another investigator sat at the HOA's desktop computer, its wallpaper a picture of Karen at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, scrolling through layers of an Adobe Illustrator file. She zoomed in on a particular section. The room went silent. There it was, the original map, with Ridgewood's boundary clearly ending where it should. Then another layer, Karen's layer, slid into view, a poorly blended, digitally stretched shape pushing the HOA line 20 yards into my property. Metadata screamed the truth. Author, K. Westmore, edited 2:13 a.m. Software, Adobe, Illustrator, CC device, RWW Office, PSU, a smoking gun if there ever was one. Marissa covered her mouth, whispering, "Got her." But the biggest twist of the morning came next. A commotion echoed from the hallway, voices arguing, sharp, panicked. I stepped out and saw Sheriff Daniels leading out a man in a wrinkled county clerk shirt. Name tag, H. Harrison. The same clerk Lorraine said accepted the $6,750 county facilitation payment. The same clerk who edited my parcel map at 2:13 a.m. He was sweating through his collar. I didn't do anything wrong," he stammered. "Karen said the boundary change was already approved. She said it was administrative cleanup." Daniels didn't blink. "So, she paid you $6,750 for cleanup?" Harrison's face collapsed into guilt. "It was just one time," he whispered. "I needed the money, my wife's medical bills. Karen said it was nothing serious." Marissa stepped forward, voice cold as steel. "You falsified a public land record, Mr. Harrison. That's a felony, and you know it." He sagged, defeated. "I'll cooperate," he said softly. "I'll tell the DA everything, every message, every payment, every instruction she gave me." Royce nodded with grim satisfaction. "And you'll be charged, but cooperation will help." Harrison lowered his head as deputies led him out, his career and freedom dissolving behind him. Another domino down, but the Queen was still missing. I found her in the back office, rifling through a drawer with frantic energy, papers flying, her pearl necklace snapped and hanging crooked. When she saw me in the doorway, her expression twisted into pure hatred. You, she hissed. This is your fault. You ruined everything. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. Sheriff Daniels entered behind me. Karen Westmore, he announced. You're under arrest for falsification of land records, environmental interference, conspiracy to commit fraud, financial misconduct, and bribery of a public official. Karen whipped toward him, wild-eyed. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president, Daniels actually laughed. Lady, that's not a title. That's a hobby. Two deputies moved in. Karen backed up, knocking over a stack of binders. You don't understand, she screamed. I did everything for this community. I protected property values. Click. The handcuffs snapped around her wrists. She froze. They promised me $500,000, she whispered. The confession spilled out before she realized what she'd said. Daniels raised an eyebrow. Thanks for confirming motive. Karen's mouth fell open. She'd just buried herself deeper. Residents were gathering outside now, whispering, filming on their phones, staring as Karen stumbled out in cuffs. Some gasped, some cheered, some crossed their arms as if everything suddenly made sense. Karen twisted toward them, shouting, Don't let him take your homes. He doesn't belong here. None of this is real. He's the problem. A deputy gently pushed her into the SUV and shut the door. Silence fell over the HOA. The queen had fallen. Royce turned to me, arms folded. You did good work, Jake, he said. You built this case cleaner than half my investigators. I just followed the maps, I replied. He smirked. Well, now the real cleanup begins. Behind us, investigators carried out boxes of files, computers, and the original forged documents. Lorraine's ledger had been confirmed. The trench was confirmed. The metadata was confirmed. The bribe was confirmed. And by sundown, Ridgewood Meadows HOA was placed under emergency state oversight pending full dissolution. For the first time in months, my land felt quiet again. Not peaceful, not yet, but quiet. The war wasn't over, but its loudest, ugliest battle had been won. The final chapter of this mess didn't come with fireworks, sirens, or a dramatic chase. It came with paperwork, hearings, and slow, grinding justice. The kind that moves like a glacier but crushes everything in its path when it finally arrives. 3 weeks after the raid, I found myself back in the county courthouse. Same beige walls, same squeaky floors, same coffee machine that tasted like burnt cardboard. But today the air felt different, lighter. This wasn't another battle. This was the verdict. The courtroom filled early. Reporters, neighbors, ex-HOA residents, county officials. People whispered, as if waiting for a parade to start. Then they brought in Karen Westmore, not in pearls, not in a pressed blazer, not with her trademark clipboard. She shuffled in wearing the county's dull orange inmate uniform. Her hair sat flat against her head. Her eyes looked smaller somehow, like all the hot air had finally leaked out of her. She didn't look at me, not once, but I saw the tremble in her jaw when the judge called the hearing to order. The DA laid out the charges again. Fraudulent boundary manipulation, falsification of public records, conspiracy to misappropriate association funds, environmental interference, attempted extortion. Then he added something new, and bribery of a public official. All eyes turned to the back of the room. There sat Clerk Harrison, now in a county-issued suit, not a county-issued jumpsuit, waiting to testify against her. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. Karen glared at him as if she could set him on fire with her stare. Harrison didn't look back. The judge flipped through the folder of evidence. My maps, the metadata logs, Lorraine's financial records, photographs of the trench, screenshots from the 2:13 a.m. edits, copies of the Shadow Fund withdrawals, wire transactions, and my trail cam footage of Tyler cutting the generator line. It was a mountain of proof. A mountain Karen couldn't climb. When Judge Cordova finally spoke, her voice filled the room. Mrs. Westmore, you abused your authority, violated state law, forged official documentation, and attempted to seize property that did not belong to you. You weaponized a homeowners association for personal gain. You endangered environmental protections, and you did so knowingly and deliberately. Karen's jaw clenched. Therefore, this court sentences you to... You could hear the entire room stop breathing. 7 years in state prison with eligibility for supervised release after 4. A stunned gasp rippled through the audience. Some people covered their mouths, some shook their heads, some nodded in grim satisfaction. Karen swayed, hands trembling, her voice cracked. 7? For an administrative misunderstanding? Cordova slammed the gavel. Sit down! Karen sat. The battle was officially over, at least for her. Tyler got his sentence next. 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a felony conviction for tampering with utility infrastructure and criminal mischief. He wasn't handcuffed. He cried instead. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. He'd cut my generator line. He'd destroyed my gate. He got off lighter than he deserved. Next came Clerk Harrison. His lawyer tried to spin it as financial desperation, but the judge wasn't having it. He got 5 years, suspended to 18 months in county jail, and 5 years probation, plus a ban from holding any government position ever again. When the judge finished, Harrison gave me a defeated, apologetic nod. I didn't nod back. Some things you don't get to apologize for. Then Judge Cordova addressed the biggest issue of them all. Regarding Ridgewood Meadows Homeowners Association, she said, "This court finds that the organization, under current leadership, engaged in fraudulent activity, coerced non-members into paying unlawful dues, manipulated zoning records, and violated state property laws." She straightened. "Effective immediately, the HOA is dissolved. All assets are seized pending redistribution to affected property owners." You could almost hear the HOA collapsing in real time. Some residents burst into applause before the bailiff barked at them to quiet down. Me? I just breathed. For the first time in months, I breathed deep. Outside the courthouse, local reporters swarmed the steps. "Mr. Halstead, do you have a statement? Do you feel vindicated? What will you do with the settlement money?" I gave them the only answer that mattered. "I'm going home." Marissa smirked at that. "You earned it." She handed me the check, the settlement the court awarded me, $275,000, enough to restore the barn, rebuild the dock, finish the solar array, and still have enough left to celebrate with a bottle of whiskey older than I was. I shook her hand. "Couldn't have done this without you." She shrugged. "You did most of the heavy lifting. I just carried the briefcase." When I arrived back on my land, the sky had turned gold. Bees buzzed softly around the native flowers near the creek. My airstream glinted under the sun like a polished coin. The land felt alive again. Mine again. Exactly as it was always meant to be. Neighbors I'd never met before came by offering congratulations, dropping off pies, asking how they could put their own land into conservation status. Even the sheriff stopped by. Denny Hope leaned on his cruiser with a tired grin. "Well," he said, "you sure stirred the hornet's nest." "Not my first time dealing with hornets." "You ever think about running for office?" he joked. I shook my head. "I just want quiet." "Well," he said, climbing back into his cruiser, "you've earned that too." As dusk settled over the land, I carried a carved cedar plank out to the front gate, made from the original barn frame, the piece I'd saved. I bolted it to the post, stepped back, read it out loud. "Private land begins here, and your fantasies end." For the first time since I bought this land, I felt real peace wash over me. No drones, no forged maps, no trenches, no HOA oversight committees, no Karen, just wind through the grass, coyotes in the distance, and the soft, steady hum of my solar grid powering my home. Justice had been served, nature had been restored, and my land, my hard-won, hard-fought land, was finally mine again. I closed the gate, locked it, turned toward the field, and walked back home.